Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of the newspaper analysis from the UPSC perspective. Topics for today's discussion are displayed on your screen. Let's begin the discussion. Now let's start our session with our first article which appeared on page number 9 in the Hindu newspaper. This article is about the funding by World Bank to help India to prepare for future pandemics as well as to strengthen its health structure. The lending will be divided into two complementary loans of $500 million each. So through this combined financing of $1 billion, the bank will support India's flagship Pradhan Mantri Ayushman Bharat Health Infrastructure Mission. This mission was launched in October 2021 to improve the public healthcare infrastructure across the country. Now, as this article talks about health sector, and you know that health is very important theme under GS paper 2. Also, UPSC has been asking question based on government initiative with respect to health. Like this question based on Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission came in year 2022. Now this theme is also important for your mains examination as UPSC has been framing question based on health system. Like this question came in year 2015 and question based on local community level healthcare intervention came in year 2018. So as this theme is quite important, so in this discussion, we will be taking up important facets related to healthcare system in India. Then we will be looking into issues and concerns of the health sector. We'll see few government initiatives and we'll end our discussion with a way ahead. So let's start our discussion. Now why this health sector in India is important? Because it has grown significantly in both employment and income. Basically, it comprises of hospitals, medical devices, clinical trials, medical tourism, health insurance, and medical equipment, etc. So broadly, India healthcare delivery system can be categorized into two major components. What are those components? First is public and second is private. Basically, public healthcare system concentrates on establishing primary healthcare centers, that is PHCs, in rural areas while maintaining a small number of secondary and tertiary care facilities in major cities. Second important component is private healthcare system. It provides a majority of secondary, tertiary, quaternary care institutions with major concentration in metro, that is tier 1 and tier 2 cities. Further, one must understand the government spending to the healthcare sector as well. According to Economic Survey 2022 and 23, the central and state governments budgeted expenditure on healthcare touched 2.1% of GDP in financial year 2023 and 2.2% in financial year 2022 against 1.6 in financial year 2021. So with this we can see that contribution of central and state government is increasing with respect to expenditure on healthcare. Also, the recent budget allocated, that is rupees 86,175 crore to the Department of Health and Family Welfare for the financial year 2023 to 24, and this is roughly rupees 615 for every citizen. So with these two facts, we can see that current allocation has marginally increased from that of the previous financial year. Now, as you know that India's healthcare system has improved significantly in terms of health indicators. For example, IMR, that is infant mortality rate in the country has gone down from 146 in 1951 to 28 in 2020 according to data by the government. Also, maternal mortality rate, that is MMR, in the country has also declined to 7.3 in 2016 and 18. But still healthcare system is facing certain service delivery issues because of the country's inadequate healthcare infrastructure. So let's discuss few important issues and concerns of the health sector. So the first one is lack of access to basic healthcare facilities. Why it is so? Because there is lack of financing for research, lack of qualified medical personnel, lack of quality insurance. So all this contribute to lack of basic healthcare services. It's better to understand this point with the help of example. According to 15th Finance Commission, every allopathic doctor in India caters to at least 1,511 people, which is much higher than WHO norms. According to WHO, one doctor should be there for 1,000 people. Also, there is shortage of trained nurses, as in India, currently nurse to population ratio is about 1 to 670 people, which is again against the WHO norm of 1 to 300 people. So now you can see that in India, one doctor is handling 1,500 people against WHO norms with which one doctor is responsible for 1,000 people. So if this burden is more on doctors, then somewhere it will hamper the quality assurance, which in turn will hamper the basic healthcare services. Also, in 2018, National Health Profile, a document brought out by the government as an update on the state of health infrastructure and diseases profile. This document estimated that one allopathic doctor in India caters to over 11,000 people. So with this you can imagine how grave is this issue. Second is lack of infrastructure. So let's understand this problem with the help of example. For a considerable time, the government regulation mandated that private medical colleges must be built on at least 5 acres of land. So what happened? Quite a few private colleges were built in rural areas where it became quite difficult to recruit adequately qualified full-time doctors due to lack of proper living conditions besides low pay scales. So this is one of the reasons why there is dearth of good hospitals in rural areas. Now recently only government rectified this as newly constituted National Medical Commission has put forward the idea to do away with the requirement of minimum 5 acres of land for setting up a medical college. Further, the commission has proposed to curtail the number of beds required as a proportion of the number of seats in the college. Now, one of the major concerns is the administration's insufficient financial allocation. For instance, we have already discussed that just 2.1% of GDP is allocated to health sector. Next problem is less emphasis on medical research. In India, R&D and cutting-edge technology-led new projects receive little attention. And in a circumstance like COVID-19, such technologies could be beneficial. Next problem is fake doctors. Rural medical practitioners, that is RMPs, who provide 80% of outpatient care have no formal qualifications for it. And people fall prey for such quacks, often leading to grave disabilities and loss of life. Next problem is medical workforce shortage. In India, there is a shortage of doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals. According to a study presented in Parliament by Health Minister, India is short of 6 lakh doctors in 2019. Next problem is out-of-pocket expenditure. To understand this, first you should know what is out-of-pocket expenditure. It is the money paid directly by household at the point of receiving healthcare. So problem arises when this occurs when services are neither provided free of cost through a government health facility, nor is the individual covered under any public or private insurance or social protection scheme. This you can understand that government contribution to insurance stands at roughly 32% as opposed to 83.5% in UK. So you can see the difference between government intervention here. Second is no focus on preventive care. What is preventive care? It means the measures that taken to prevent diseases rather than treating them. So in India, preventive care is undervalued despite the fact that it has been shown to be quite beneficial in alleviating a variety of difficulties for patients in terms of unhappiness and financial losses. Next problem is policy making. Now, as policy making is very crucial in providing effective and efficient healthcare services, ideally, public health policy needs to be focused towards proactive healthcare and not towards reactive healthcare. What does it mean? That one should not wait for diseases to occur. So these are all issues and concerns with respect to health sector in India. Now before moving to the measures required in the health sector, now let us see few government initiatives in this regard. As central government supports state governments in providing health services through a range of primary, secondary and tertiary care system, despite the fact that health is state subject. So first, very important measure, taken by government is Ayushman Bharat. It has two components. The first one is Health and Wellness Center, which will provide comprehensive health care and will be responsible for providing free essential drug and diagnostic services. Another important component is National Health Protection Mission. This will subsume the ongoing centrally sponsored scheme, that is Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, and another one is Senior Citizen Health Insurance Scheme. Also, you should remember that it is a government sponsored program for low income families. It has the ability to cover roughly 50 crore people. Also, it covers secondary and tertiary care hospitalization for up to 5 lakh per household per year. Second initiative is National Ayush Mission. This mission is responsible for the development of traditional medicines in India as a centrally sponsored scheme until 2026. Another important measure taken by government is National Health Mission, which encompasses two submissions. The first one is National Rural Health Mission and another one is National Urban Health Mission. And the main programmatic components includes health system strengthening in rural and urban areas, then reproductive, maternal, neonatal, child, adolescent health, and communicable and non-communicable diseases. Next important initiative is Pradhan Mantri Bharatiya Jan Aushadhi Pariyojana Kendra. This has been set up to provide generic drugs which are available at lesser prices but are equivalent in quality and efficacy as expensive branded drugs. So how this will help? This will help to reduce out-of-pocket expenditure. Now, having seen the issues and concerns with respect to health sector in India and government initiative in this regard, now let us understand few measures required in the health sector. Now, the foremost improvement required in this sector is improving infrastructure. There is an urgent need to improve the infrastructure of public hospitals, which are overburdened as a result of India's large population. Also, government should encourage private hospitals. Why? Because they make a significant contribution. Over 70% of total healthcare expenditure is accounted for by the private hospitals. However, private hospitals don't have adequate presence in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, and this should be addressed by appropriate policy interventions. Next is to increase efficiency. How? Now, to improve the sector's capabilities and efficiency, what is required is more medical personnel. So, more medical personnel must be hired. Next important measure is utilization of technology. So, in order to connect the dots in health system, technology must be used. For example, telemedicine, medical gadgets in hospital and clinics, mobile health apps, sensors. These are few examples of technology that should be included in this area. And a very important measure is awareness. People should be made aware of the importance of early detection and prevention. How this will help? It would assist them in reducing their out-of-pocket expenses. Next very important measure is network of health and wellness centers. Now, the establishment of network of health and wellness centers should be complemented with public health programs through soft touch governance, using targeted messaging and mobilizing the youth. These centers would deliver comprehensive primary health care, that is, bringing health care closer to the homes of people, covering both maternal and child health services and non-communicable diseases, including free essential drugs and diagnostic services. For example, eSanjeevani, Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Center. So, having seen important measures required in this sector, a comprehensive approach is needed to address issues in the Indian healthcare sector. This necessitates active cooperation among all parties involved, including those from the public, corporate, and individual sectors. Government must continue to be interested in strategic health policy as a significant economic component. Now, our next discussion is based on this article, which appeared on page number 1 in the Hindu newspaper. Context of this article is that in a significant decision, the government has decided to give a one-time option to select central government employees to migrate to old pension scheme. And government has suggested few criteria for that. And what are those criteria? The employer should have applied for jobs advertised before 22nd December 2003, the day National Pension System was notified, but joined service in 2004 when the NPS came into effect. Second criteria is the option is available to central government employees enrolled under the NPS as they join service on or after January 1st, 2004. And the order will also be applicable to Central Armed Police Forces personnel. Employees have time till August 31 to opt for old pension scheme. Now, as pension is important component of welfare schemes for vulnerable section, which is important theme under GS paper 2, and also as it deals with finances is important from the perspective of GS paper 3 also. Pension architecture is also important as UPSC has already asked question based on national pension system in year 2017. We'll try to solve this question after our discussion. Also in 2016, they have asked question based on Atal Pension Yojana. Try to answer this question and write your answer in our comment box. So in this discussion, we will be dealing with important facts related to national pension scheme and what are the differences between old pension scheme and new pension scheme. Then we'll discuss what is the need for pension and concerns related with old pension scheme. So let's start our discussion. Now what is national pension system? It is a pension cum investment scheme to provide old age security to citizens of India, and it is regulated by Pension Fund Regulatory and Development Authority. Now the next question is, who can join national pension system? Any individual citizen of India. This includes both resident and non-resident in the age group of 18 to 65 years. Now let's see what are the different sectors involved in this. The first is government sector. Now central government had introduced the national pension system with effect from January 1, 2004, except for armed forces. Also, all the employees of central autonomous bodies who have joined on or after the above mentioned date are also mandatorily covered. So these employees are mandatorily covered and armed forces are not included in it. Further, central government and central autonomous bodies employee contributes toward pension from monthly salary along with matching contribution from the employer. Now what is the scenario with the state government? Even state government have adopted this architecture. But it is the discretion of state government whether to opt national pension system or not. Another sector is private sector, that is non-government sector, and what it includes corporates and all citizens of India. That means any individual not being covered by any of the above sectors has been allowed to join national pension system from 2009 onwards. So if there is any statement like all citizens which are not being covered by any of the sectors has been allowed to join NPS since the inception, that is 2004, that means that statement is incorrect. Why? Because they are allowed after 2009 onwards. So now let's discuss the proportion of contribution. Now government employees make a monthly contribution at a rate of 10% of their salary, and a matching contribution is paid by the government. Now what is the matching contribution? That is same 10%. For example, X salary is 100 rupees. So 10% of 100 will be contributed by the government employee and the same 10% will be contributed by the government. But now for central government employees, the employee's contribution rate has been enhanced to 14%. That is from 1st April 2009. So earlier, government contribution was 10% similar to the employee's contribution, but now it's 14%. That is 14 rupees in this case. So now what happens to the contribution? This contribution invested in certain pension funds, which in turn invest in different asset classes such as D6, shares, bond, etc. to generate high return. And this will be done through a annuity model. And what is that? It is a financial instrument which offers monthly, quarterly, annual pension at a specified rate for the chosen period. The onus of purchasing the annuity plan from approved pension providers is on the employee under new pension system. At the time of retirement, employees are required to purchase an annuity plan for a monthly pension with a minimum of 40% of the accumulated corpus. So the employee can withdraw the remaining amount as a lump sum amount. Now, what are the returns with respect to national pension system? It is designed on defined contribution basis wherein the subscriber contributes to his account. However, there is no defined benefit that would be available at the time of exit from the system. So there is defined contribution but no defined benefit, as the accumulated wealth depends on the contribution made and the income generated from investment of such wealth. So these are the important aspects related to national pension system. Also, you should know that in journal parlance we call it new pension system. Similarly, we call all previous framework as old pension system. So now let's discuss important difference between new pension scheme and old pension scheme. Now, the first difference is nature of scheme. As we have discussed that new pension system is revolved around defined contribution. This we have already discussed, as government employees make a monthly contribution at a rate of 10% of their salary and the employer's contribution would be 14%. But old pension scheme revolve around defined benefit. Why? Because one can withdraw 50% of their last withdrawn salary. So here defined contribution is there and here defined benefit is there. Second is contribution. In new pension system, both government and employee will contribute. But in old pension system, only government will contribute. And this is one of the important reasons behind the current debate between new pension and old pension scheme. Another criteria is benefit. As in new pension system, there is no defined benefit, as the accumulated wealth depends upon the contribution made. But in old pension scheme, there is defined benefit, as pension of 50% of the last drawn salary, and this is fixed and this is market linked. And the last criteria is pension amount. Now here it depends on the number of years of service. So longer the years of service, higher will be the contribution and higher will be the pension. But here it all depends upon the last drawn salary. Here pension is equal to 50% of last drawn salary. So these are the basic criteria on which there is a difference between national pension system and old pension system. Now let's solve this question. Question says, who among the following can join the national pension system? First option is resident Indian citizens only. Now as you know that in this any individual citizen of India can invest, whether resident or non-resident. So this option is incorrect. Second is person of age from 21 to 55 only. This fact is also incorrect, as in this the age group is 18 to 65 years. Now let's come to the last option. All the central government employees, including those of armed forces, joining the services on or after 1st April 2004. As we have already discussed, this fact is also incorrect. Why? Because central government has introduced the national pension system with effect from January 1, 2004. Also, except for armed forces. So here these two facts are incorrect. So your correct answer is option C. That is, all state government employees join the service after the date of notification by the respective state governments. Now on the basis of our discussion, let's solve another MCQ. Question says, with respect to differences between new pension system and old pension system, consider the following statements. The first is, both new pension system and old pension system provide for equal contribution by employer and government. This we have already discussed, that in new pension system, government employee makes a monthly contribution at a rate of 10% of their salary and 14% of it is paid by the government. And in old pension system, entirely is paid by the government. So first statement is incorrect. Now let's come to the second statement. Unlike old pension system, new pension system provides for defined benefits. Now this we have already discussed, that new pension system revolves around defined contribution but no defined benefit. Rather, it's old pension system which revolves around defined benefits. So here both the statements are incorrect, so our answer is option D. Now let us look at some other aspects of this debate which can be used as a fodder for arguments while writing your GS answer as well as your essay. So let's discuss why there is need for pension. So the first point is, individual is not as productive in the old age as in youth. So it will enhance the prospect of social security net for the old age population. Another factor is rise of nuclear family, migration of younger earning members, leaving the old age members of the family on their own or at the discretion of their children. So this will help them. The next is rise in cost of living. Now, as saving may prove to be futile if level of inflation is considered. The next reason is increased longevity. Now, developments in health sector have resulted in longer duration of individual life. So considering the average age of retirement in India, which is around 60, people would need assistance for longer duration after the retirement. And another important reason for pension is that assured monthly income ensures dignified life in old age. It gives freedom to exercise choices due to lessened dependability on others. So these are the reasons why there is need for pension. Now let's discuss what are the concerns with the old pension system. So the first major concern with respect to old pension system is pension liability remained unfunded. Now, as there was no corpus specifically for the pension which would grow continuously and could be dipped into for payments. Now, the Government of India budget provided for pensions every year. There was no clear plan on how to pay year after year in the future. The government estimated payments to retirees ahead of the budget every year, and the present generation of taxpayers paid for all pensioners as on date. The pay-as-you-go scheme created intergenerational equity issues, meaning the present generation had to bear the continuously rising burden of pensioners. So this is one of the major concerns. Another is that old pension system is unsustainable. How? As pension liabilities would keep climbing since pensioners' benefits increased every year, like salaries of existing employees, pensioners gain from indexation. So over the last 3 decades, pension liabilities for the center and states have jumped manifold. In 1990 and 91, the center's pension bill was rupees 3,272 crore and the outgo for all state put together was rupees 3,131 crore. And by 2020 and 21, the center bills had jumped 58 times. That is 1,90,886 crores. And for state, if you see, it's 125 times. That is 3,86,000 crores. So you can see the difference between the amount. Next problem is lesser availability of funds for competing demands, especially in case of states. The availability of funds for range of the provisions like of health and education facilities, public transport takes a bow. This point better to understand with the help of example. In 30 years, the cumulative pension bill of states had jumped to 3,86,000 crores in 2020-21 from 3,131 crore in 1990 to 1991. So overall pension payments by states eat away a quarter of their own tax revenues. For some states, it is much higher. For example, for Himachal, it is 80% pension as percentage of the state's own tax revenue. And for Punjab, it is 35%. So if wages and salaries of state government employees are added to this bill, states are left with hardly anything for their own tax receipts. So this is one of the biggest problems. Next problem is better health facilities would increase life expectancy and increase longevity. That means extended payouts. Another is issue of intergenerational equity. Today's taxpayers paying for the ever-increasing pension of retirees, with pay commission awards almost taking the pension of old retirees to current level. What does it mean? That pension of someone who retired in year 1995 may well be the same as that for someone who retires in 2025. Another problem is fiscal position of states. State government debt has risen from 26.3% of GDP in 2019-20 to 31% in 2021 and 22. This will need to be brought down to manageable levels. Shifting back to the old pension scheme will only further increase the burden on the state. As per RBI, total pension expenditure of all states put together stood at 3.86 lakh crore in 2020 to 21, and states must desist from such fiscally unwise moves suggested by RBI. Now, having seen the important facts with respect to national pension system and the differences between the national and the old pension system, and why there is need for pension and what are the concerns with pension, one should understand that for the first time in human history, people aged 65 and over outnumber children aged 5 or younger. And while this stress may be less for a country such as India, which has relatively younger population profile, there is such a thing as longevity risk, which we have already discussed. Longevity risk points to a scenario where rising life expectancy could result in pension and insurance companies needing more cash because people are living for longer than anticipated. So in this context, merely obsessing over the nitty-gritty of old pension and new pension scheme makes one miss the forest for the trees. Indian pension architecture is in dire need for reform, and it must address the quantitative as well as the qualitative aspects of pension framework in India. Now our next discussion is based on two articles, and this one appeared on page number 6 and this one appeared on page number 8 in the Hindu newspaper. And context of this article is that higher judiciary has lately given two prominent decisions which have raised the eyebrows of constitutional experts regarding the breach of separation of power in India. In this, the court has ruled that a three-member committee comprising the Prime Minister, leader of opposition in Lok Sabha, or the leader of the single largest opposition party, and the Chief Justice of India will choose the CEC, that is Chief Election Commissioners, and other election commissioners until a law passed. And in this, the Supreme Court on Friday used this extraordinary powers under Article 142 to attract younger talent to preside over consumer courts by reducing the mandatory professional experience from 20 to 10 years. In both the cases, SC is not pronouncing a judgment, that is, deciding a dispute between the two parties, but rather it is legislating new rules and laws. It is this phenomena which is often termed as judicial activism, or when practiced in excess, known as judicial overreach. Now, judicial activism in India refers to proactive role played by the judiciary in interpreting the constitution and laws to promote social justice and protect fundamental rights. The Supreme Court has been particularly active in shaping public policy and addressing issues that affect the lives of millions of people in India. Judicial activism has been seen as a positive force for change in India, particularly in cases where the legislature or executive has failed to take action on important issues. However, there have also been concerns about judicial overreach, where the courts are perceived to have gone beyond their constitutional role and interfered with the functioning of other branches of the government. So, this discussion would be about the debate over the proper balance between judicial activism and judicial restraints continues to be a topic of discussion in India. And this is one of the important themes under GS paper 2. Also, UPSC has already asked question based on doctrine of separation of powers in year 2020. So, in this discussion, we will talk about what exactly is judicial activism and what are the causes of judicial activism and judicial overreach. Then we'll talk about concerns over judicial overreach in India, and we'll end our discussion with how to address the judicial activism. So let's start our discussion. Now, what is judicial activism? It refers to tendency of judges to interpret the constitution and laws in a way that actively shapes social and political change, rather than limiting themselves to a strict interpretation of the law. In India, judicial activism has played a significant role in shaping the country's legal and political landscape. For example, court has issued ruling that protects the rights of marginalized groups such as women, religious minorities, and LGBTQ+ individuals. It has also taken steps to combat corruption and promote government accountability. One of the famous examples of judicial activism in India is the case of Keshav Nanda Bharti versus State of Kerala, which established the principle of basic structure of the constitution. The court held that certain fundamental features of the constitution, such as democracy, secularism, and the rule of law, are essential and cannot be amended by the parliament. So now let's discuss the difference between judicial activism and judicial overreach. Now the first is, what is judicial activism? It is manifested when the Supreme Court or the High Court become an activist and compels the authority to act and sometimes also direct the government policies and administration. While what is judicial overreach? It is an extreme form of judicial activism where arbitrary and unreasonable interventions are made by the judiciary into the domain of legislature or executive. Here, the court encroaches upon the role of the legislature by making laws. And what are the examples of judicial activism? Like directing the center to create new policy to handle drought, to set up bad loan panel, or reforming board for the control of cricket in India, that is a private body. And what are the examples of judicial overreach? The very important example under this is directing the government to constitute collegium to appoint EC, an extra constitutional body. Another is invalidating the National Judicial Accountability Commission Act 2014, seeking to ensure transparency and accountability in higher judiciary. So these are the instances of judicial activism and judicial overreach. So now let's discuss what are the causes of judicial activism and judicial overreach. The first cause is asymmetry of power. Now, as you know, Supreme Court is the most powerful branch of governance. Its every judgment is binding on the other two branches, that is, legislature and executive. And also it can strike down their actions as well as their laws. Second is public interest litigation. Now, PIL permitted any member of the society to file a case for appropriate direction against any injustice. Consequently, the expectations of the public went high for judicial intervention to improve administration. Next is lackadaisical approach of other organs. And what are those organs? Legislature and executive. Lax functioning of these two organs result in corruption, delay and non-responsiveness or inefficiency in the governance. So what happened? These things create a vacuum in governance, and most of the time such vacuums are filled by judiciary. And what are the other factors? First is growing consciousness of people for their rights. Then another one is globalization, active media and civil society organization. Concerns for the environment, among others, are also considered important reasons. So these are the causes behind the rise of judicial activism and judicial overreach. Now let's discuss important concerns over judicial overreach in India. Now, while judicial activism has been seen as a positive force for change in India, there have also been concerns about judicial overreach, where the courts are perceived to have gone beyond their constitutional role and interfered with the functioning of the other branches of government. So the first concern is it undermines the separation of powers between the judiciary, legislature and executive. Critics argue that by making policy decisions, the judiciary is encroaching on the domain of the elected representatives and upsetting the delicate balance of power between the branches of government. Another concern is it lacks accountability towards people. How? As judiciary as an institution is not accountable to the people in the same way as the legislature and executive. Further, judiciary also has the power to punish for contempt of court. So what happened? This way, judiciary may evade public criticism for many of its actions. Another concern is it creates a sense of uncertainty and instability, as policies that have been enacted through the democratic process can be challenged in court. So what will happen? This can lead to a situation where the courts are perceived as overriding the will of the people and the democratic process. There have been instances where Supreme Court of India has been accused of judicial overreach. For example, the court has been criticized for interfering in matters of executive decision making such as appointment of government officials, regulation of environmental policies, management of religious sites. Now, having seen the differences between judicial overreach and judicial activism and what are the concerns over judicial overreach, let's discuss how to address judicial activism. To address these concerns, there have been a call for greater judicial restraint and for the courts to limit their intervention in matters that are primarily the responsibility of the other branches of the government. So the first point here is by encouraging judicial restraint. Now, judicial restraint refers to the idea that judges should limit their role to interpreting laws rather than creating them. Why? To ensure that judicial activism does not undermine the democratic process. It is important to encourage judges to practice judicial restraint and only intervene when necessary to protect fundamental rights or address clear injustice. Another way to address judicial activism is by fostering public education. Now, as one of the criticism of judicial activism is that it can be perceived as anti-democratic or elitist. So, to address this, it is important to foster public education on the role of judiciary and benefits of judicial activism. So, how this will help? As this can help citizens understand why judges sometimes need to use their power to protect the interests of marginalized groups or uphold constitutional values. Another way is to promote transparency and accountability. To ensure that judicial activism is not abused, it is important to promote transparency and accountability in the judicial process. This can include measures such as public access to court proceedings, records, clear guidelines for judicial decision making, and oversight mechanism to ensure that judges are held accountable for their action. Next is foster judicial diversity. Now, to promote fair and just decision making, it is important to foster judicial diversity. And how it can be done? By increasing the representation of women, minorities, and other marginalized groups on the bench, as well as promoting judicial education on issues related to social justice and human rights. Last but not the least is encourage dialogue and debate. Now, it is important to encourage dialogue and debate on the role of judiciary and the use of judicial activism. This can include public forums, academic conferences, other platforms for discussing the benefits and drawbacks of judicial activism and how it can be used in a way that is consistent with democratic principles. So, by adopting these approaches, we can ensure that judicial activism is used in a way that upholds the principle of democracy, rule of law, and justice, and also helps to promote a more just and equitable society. Now, our first prelim pointer is based on this article which appeared on page 9 in the Hindu newspaper. And context of this article is that recently Chinese Foreign Minister met External Affairs Minister and asked India to look at relations in the context of once-in-a-century changes in the world and put the border issue in the proper place. So the first statement is, River Indus originates in the Raksastal near Mansarovar in Tibet. Now this statement is false. Why? Because river Satluj emerges from this glacier while river Indus originates from a glacier near Bokarchu in the Tibetan region in Kailash mountain range. Next statement is, Yongyap Pass is an important pass between Ladakh and Tibet. Again, this statement is false because this pass is between Arunachal Pradesh and Tibet. And this pass is also known as Dihang Pass and Brahmaputra enters from this pass. Our next pointer is based on this article which appeared on page 9. And context of this article is that recently World Bank released Women, Business and the Law report, and according to which India scores 74.4. Now the first statement is, Index used data on laws applicable in all the 4 metropolitan cities in India. Now this statement is false as Index used data in Mumbai only and not in 4 metropolitan cities, as it is viewed as economic capital of the country. Now let's come to the second statement. India scored higher than average for the South Asian region. Now this statement is true as India scored 74.4, which is higher than average for South Asian region, that is 63.7. But India scored lower than Nepal, which is 80.6. That's all for today. Stay tuned for more such updates.